Hey, you old hag. Don't think you can get away with locking me up in this place. Let me go home right now, you heartless woman.
When I walked into my son's hospital room, he saw me and erupted in anger. He unleashed all his pent up frustrations on me. One day, my son, now a college student, collapsed at home and was rushed to the hospital. He needed surgery immediately, but my husband suggested we keep that from him. Now, my son was hurling insults at me with pure hatred.
I've never thought of you as my mom. So just get lost. Fake mom, don't show me your face.
Even though he's my son, he's actually my husband's child from his previous marriage, so we're not related by blood. And yet, my husband has never faced his son, always buried in his work, treating the whole situation like it's someone else's problem. For over 10 years, I've been mistreated by this family, treated like a free housekeeper. How many more years will I have to endure this life? Just when I was feeling utterly hopeless, my son's friend shared some shocking information with me. Listening to their story, I was in disbelief. It turns out my husband and son were hiding something so outrageous that they couldn't tell anyone. Fine, just as my son wants, I'll disappear from their lives. It's ironic because it's my in-laws who will suffer from this, but they don't seem to realize it yet. When I revealed the truth to my husband and son, they started a physical fight. As I watched the family I once knew crumble before my eyes, I couldn't help but smile to myself. My name is Helen Murphy. I live in a small town and will be 45 this year. As a child, I got completely hooked on the internet after my dad brought home a computer, and my passion led me to start working from home at the age of 20, using my computer. I'd spend day and night typing away at the keyboard, sometimes forgetting to sleep. My days were fulfilling, immersed in doing what I loved. However, I started to feel a little anxious. Living at home and working from home, I found it more and more difficult to go out, and there were many days I didn't even see the sunlight. Before I knew it, I was celebrating my 30th birthday without ever meeting anyone special. While my friends who stayed in our small town instead of moving to a big city were getting married and starting families early. Sensing that my parents, who I still lived with, were worried about my future, I decided to join a matchmaking agency. That's where I met the man who would become my husband, Eric. Eric is 3 years older than me, a sociable real estate agent with a solid build. He was the complete opposite of me, who worked alone from home. At first, I was confused by the introduction, but for some reason, we clicked and couldn't stop talking once we started. For Eric, a true athlete, I must have seemed like a rare find, as he was kind and interested in me from our first meeting.
Being able to work from home is great. I can't work unless I'm out and about.
No, actually, it's the only thing I can do. Did that turn you off?
No way, I actually think it's really cool. You can keep doing that even after we get married.
When Eric cheerfully mentioned the word marriage, I couldn't help but blush. Honestly, I think Eric is amazing, and I can't help but imagine what it would be like to spend my life with someone like him. But it's not just his looks or the way he talks that makes him special to me. You see, Eric has been through a divorce and is raising a son on his own. 2 years ago, his ex-wife abandoned their child and left.
I'm a divorced guy with a kid, so it's hard for me to find a girlfriend.
He said self-deprecatingly, but I couldn't help but respect him for juggling work and raising his son. Eventually, we started dating, and I got to meet Eric's son, Nathan. Nathan had just started third grade, and he was a lively, cheerful boy. He always carried small bags of candy, and every time we met, he'd share some with me, saying, "Here, this is for you." It was so adorable that it made my heart swell, even though he wasn't my biological child. I've been struggling with unexplained menstrual irregularities for years and was diagnosed by my gynecologist as having a low chance of conceiving, so I had given up on having a child of my own. That's why I would be so happy if Nathan became my child. Eric assured me that having Nathan was enough for him too. Our relationship progressed smoothly, and when we got engaged, Nathan was overjoyed, raising both hands in celebration. Eric's dad had already passed away, so we informed his mom about our marriage plans, and I was relieved that she warmly welcomed me with the same smile as Eric's. I'm going to be part of this family. Surrounded by the smiles of the three of them, I felt genuinely happy. After that, Eric and I got married. Eric was already living with his elderly mom, who had diabetes, and raising Nathan, so I moved into their house, and the four of us began our life together. Everything seemed perfect, or so I thought at the time. However, this marriage would soon plunge me into despair. As soon as I started living with Eric's family, the attitudes of the three of them suddenly changed. The change was so drastic that I felt like I was living with different people. By this time, Nathan was in the upper grades of elementary school, but he was constantly spoiled by his grandmother, who bought him any toys or games he wanted. As a result, whenever something didn't go his way, he would throw tantrums and act as he pleased. Even though he was still a child, he was old enough to know better. Given that he had to function in a group setting at school, he needed to learn at least a little bit of self-restraint. What concerned me the most was his eating habits. Nathan was extremely picky and wouldn't touch a single vegetable, only eating specific foods like potatoes, meat, and sweet bread. Moreover, he would gorge on sweets before and after meals. And it wasn't just any sweets. He would throw a fit if he didn't get high-calorie treats like potato chips and chocolate. As a mother, I felt it was my duty to manage his health, so one day, I decided to speak up. "Nathan, let's try not to eat too many snacks before dinner, okay? And during dinner, even just a little bit. Try eating some vegetables."
I want to eat this now. I don't want to eat vegetables, and as long as I'm full, it doesn't matter what I eat.
"That's not how it works. How about trying this fish snack instead of potato chips? It's healthy and tastes good too."
I don't want to eat that. If you're going to bother me, go away.
Nathan kicked me away, and though I was startled by his behavior, I backed down that day. But after that, I kept trying different ways to improve Nathan's eating habits. In between my work from home tasks, I made low-calorie snacks and even tried mixing vegetables into his meatballs. But Nathan always noticed when something was different with his food and refused to eat it.
What's this disgusting food? There's no way I'm eating this. You're such a terrible cook, so just stop making anything.
Nathan would insult me and overturn the carefully prepared meals I had made. I finally lost my temper and stood up to scold him. But just then, Eric's mother, Susan, intervened and ended up scolding me instead.
"Helen, why do you keep doing things that Nathan hates? This is just harassment. Poor Nathan."
She patted Nathan on the head, and he sat there smugly. This happened repeatedly. No matter how hard I tried to change our lifestyle, I was only met with insults from Nathan and scoldings from Susan. I grew increasingly frightened of the two of them, and finally, I decided to confide in Eric. Eric was always busy with work, often working overtime on weekdays and even on weekends. Whether he was aware of the situation at home or not, he always seemed indifferent. Nathan is going to end up unhealthy at this rate. Can't you, as his father, say something to him?
Give me a break. I'm swamped with my work every day. That's your job now as his mom, isn't it?
But I've only been his mom for a few months, and I haven't known Nathan that long. Can't you at least ask Susan to stop always siding with him?
My mom has been taking care of Nathan ever since my ex-wife left. She knows him better than anyone, so you should just follow her lead.
No matter what I said to Eric, he had no intention of getting involved in this issue. So I tried to leave Nathan alone. But Nathan's weight kept ballooning to the point where he no longer looked like a child, and his health checkups started to show concerning results. Panicking, I decided to remove all the snacks from the house, but when Nathan discovered there were no snacks, he flew into a rage and even damaged the walls of the house. To make matters worse, Susan, feeling sorry for Nathan, secretly bought him snacks, undoing all my efforts. Since I couldn't change his diet, I thought at least I could get him to exercise. But Nathan didn't want to play outside with his friends. He preferred to spend all his time playing video games indoors. Of course, when I tried to hide his games, it resulted in a tantrum, just like with the snacks. Eventually, even the school contacted us, concerned about Nathan's picky eating habits during lunch. At my wit's end, I approached Eric again. Nathan's health is seriously at risk. He's eating whatever he wants without any regard for nutrition. He never goes outside to play.
He's just doing what he wants, and that's fine. When I was a kid, my mom let me eat whatever I wanted, and look at me now, tight and in great shape.
Eric boasted, showing off his muscular physique. Eric had played baseball as a child and had a solid build. He dismissed my concerns, confidently claiming that Nathan would turn out the same way. And then he left for work the next day. Feeling utterly hopeless, I put my head in my hands. Just then, Nathan, who must have overheard our conversation, marched up to me.
Don't go telling Dad stuff he doesn't need to hear. You're not even my real mom, so just shut up and do what I say. Or do you want to get kicked out of the house like Mom?
What do you mean? I was shocked by Nathan's words. As far as I knew, Eric's ex-wife had left suddenly, leaving only a divorce notice behind. Despite the awful treatment I received from Nathan, I sometimes felt sorry for him, having been abandoned by his real mother.
Mom was always getting yelled at by Grandma. One day when she tried to scold me, Grandma told her to get out and threw all her stuff outside. She never came back after that. Well, it's good she's gone since all she ever did was nag me anyway.
So Eric's ex-wife had been in the same situation as me. She had been driven away by Susan over disagreements about raising Nathan, ultimately leading to a forced divorce. What shocked me even more was that Nathan seemed to approve of it. Would I eventually meet the same fate as his ex-wife? These days, getting divorced isn't unusual. But before marrying Eric, my parents had expressed concerns about me remarrying into a situation with a stepchild, and I had boldly assured them it would be fine. I could already imagine the look of disbelief on their faces if I ended up back home. On top of that, in this area, getting divorced immediately makes you the subject of gossip among the neighbors. So I couldn't just leave so easily. With no escape, I had no choice but to accept my current situation. The exhaustion and stress gradually piled up. Eric dismissed my work-from-home job as just idle time and left all the household chores to me. Even when I was overwhelmed with work, and asked Susan for help. She used her diabetes as an excuse not to lift a finger. Eric, too, used his job as an excuse, claiming overtime and business trips, and spent less and less time at home. 10 years have passed since our marriage, but during that time, Nathan's behavior only worsened. Violence and verbal abuse became daily occurrences, and he even stole money from my wallet and spread rumors about me being a failure. When he became a high school student, he stopped talking to me altogether and started staying out overnight without permission. The only relief was that we never had to call the police. Now, even as a college student, Nathan continues to do whatever he pleases. He still eats only what he likes. His body continues to grow larger, and there's no sign of him losing weight. I once hoped he'd join a sports club or activity, but his aversion to anything inconvenient remained unchanged. Whenever I tried to say something, Nathan would intimidate me, acting like a tyrant king. Meanwhile, Susan's diabetes worsened, leading to a surgery where she had to have her leg amputated, making her almost bedridden. Just when I thought I might get a break from child rearing, I found myself overwhelmed with caring for her instead. Even in this situation, Eric refused to help with the household chores or caregiving, using his busy work schedule as an excuse to stay uninvolved. How many more years will this life continue? While I was feeling utterly hopeless, a certain incident occurred. Nathan, who was on summer break, started complaining of feeling unwell one morning. He couldn't stop vomiting, felt hot, and was clearly irritable. I thought it might be a cold and tried to persuade him to go to the hospital, but Nathan refused and went back to his room. I was exasperated that, even as a college student, he still hated going to the hospital. But as this continued for several days, I began to worry. One day, while I was working in my room, I heard a loud thud from Nathan's room. Panicked, I rushed to his room and called out to him, but there was no response. When I hurriedly opened the door, I found Nathan curled up on the floor beside his bed, his large body hunched over. Realizing something was seriously wrong, I rushed to his side, only to find him struggling to breathe. Even in this dire situation, Nathan lashed out at me.
Useless. Just get me to the hospital now. Can't you see something's wrong?
His arrogant tone made me angry, but now wasn't the time to argue. I wanted to take him to the hospital, but it was impossible for me to lift his large frame alone, so I called an ambulance and had him taken to the hospital. As I waited in the emergency room, Eric, who had left work early, arrived in a panic. He hadn't seen much of Nathan recently and was clearly confused about why his son had suddenly been rushed to the hospital.
Are you Nathan's parents? He's asleep right now, so I'll explain the test results to you. Please come this way.
The doctor led us to the consultation room and explained Nathan's condition to us. The atmosphere was tense, and I held my breath. Nathan had developed kidney failure, and it was quite severe. If left untreated, his kidney function would deteriorate, leading to possible consciousness loss and ultimately life-threatening consequences. The doctor strongly recommended a kidney transplant. We were suddenly faced with the reality of Nathan's life being at risk. The doctor advised us to think it over as a family, and Eric and I returned home to prepare for Nathan's hospital stay. I can't believe this is happening.
Nathan doesn't know yet, but when he finds out the truth, he'll be devastated. We should decide on a treatment or transplant before we tell him everything.
Yes, you're right.
All right then, the first step is to get tested as potential kidney donors. So, Helen, I'm counting on you.
What? I was stunned by Eric's words, especially since I had just agreed with his plan. His expression made it clear he wasn't joking. He genuinely expected me to be the one to get tested. Wait a minute, am I the only one getting tested? What about you? You're his father, aren't you?
But I'm working, and the doctor said there are risks for the donor, right? I'm scared of surgery. And what if something goes wrong? Can you take responsibility for that?
I'm working too. It's not fair to put all the responsibility on me. Please, I'm begging you, get tested too. I couldn't help but feel a growing distrust toward Eric, who was reluctant to donate a kidney to his own biological son. From Eric's response, it was clear that he didn't care what risks I might face. After repeatedly trying to convince him, Eric finally sighed in resignation.
Fine, I'll go through with the tests, but only if it's just that.
We both consulted with the doctor and underwent donor compatibility tests together. But then, the results were shocking. While I, despite my infertility, was in perfect health and had no issues with the tests, Eric was found to be unsuitable as a donor. The reason for his incompatibility was his hypertension, a condition he had been suffering from. For years, Eric had been indulging in heavy drinking under the guise of business entertainment and following an unhealthy diet. Over the past decade or so, his once proud physique had become flabby, and he had ignored his diagnosis of hypertension from previous health checkups. Susan was also out of the question due to her age and illness. We reached out to other close relatives, but they either were also incompatible or outright refused to undergo testing. In the end, I was the only one who could donate a kidney.
If you had just decided to do the transplant from the beginning, we wouldn't have wasted everyone's time. Well, at least now you'll finally have a connection with Nathan, who isn't even your blood. Good luck with the surgery.
Eric said this while patting me on the shoulder, making light of the situation. I knew that if I didn't donate my kidney, Nathan's life would be in danger. Despite the harsh treatment I'd received from Nathan, I had always felt a certain pity for him, having been pushed around by the adults in his life since he was young. Even though I was filled with anxiety, it seemed like I had no choice but to accept this fate. As I sat with my head in my hands in the hospital's lounge area, two young men, who looked like college students, came and sat at the table across from me. I recognized them. They were Nathan's friends from high school. They had visited our house a few times, so I vaguely remembered their faces.
Nathan looks like he's in bad shape. It's been a while since we last saw him, and it looks like he's gained more weight.
No wonder he got sick. Is this karma or what?
Nathan's a mess, but his dad's even worse.
They hadn't noticed me sitting nearby, and they were gossiping about Nathan and Eric. I couldn't help but ask them, "What do you mean by karma for Nathan?"
Oh,
They finally realized I was there and looked embarrassed. Of course, they had been gossiping about my son and husband right in front of me. When I told them I had overheard most of the conversation, they reluctantly shared what they knew. What I heard from them shocked me to the core. Eric and Nathan had been hiding something huge, something I could never have imagined. Knowing this, I suddenly felt a sense of clarity about what I needed to do next. When I entered Nathan's hospital room, he saw me and immediately flew into a rage.
Hey, you old hag. Don't think you can get away with locking me up in here. Let me go home. You can't understand how I feel because you're not even my real mom, you cold-hearted woman.
He hurled these insults at me, throwing a pillow in my direction. He unleashed all his pent-up frustration on me. Meanwhile, Eric was sitting nearby, scrolling on his phone as if it had nothing to do with him.
If I can't get out of here, it doesn't matter if you're around or not. I've never once thought of you as my mom. So, fake mom, just disappear. Don't show me your face.
Nathan's large size made his voice even louder. I was genuinely glad I had insisted on a private room for him. Normally, I would have been intimidated by such a barrage of insults. But after hearing all of this, I felt nothing but resolve. I approached Nathan with a firm stance. All right, I'll disappear from your life, just like you want. But before I go, don't you want to know what's really happening to your body, Nathan?
What are you talking about? You've had me in this hospital for days and never told me anything.
Yes, I tried to spare you, but it's clear that doesn't matter anymore. You have kidney failure, and without a transplant, your life is in serious danger.
What?
For the first time, Nathan's arrogance faded, replaced by fear as he heard the word danger. Eric, too, looked shocked, as if this was not the news he was expecting to hear. The doctor said we needed to do some tests to see who could donate a kidney. Both Eric and I took the tests, but it turns out I'm the only one who can donate.
You scared me for a second. I'm not thrilled about getting your kidney, but if that's how it is, just hurry up and get the surgery done.
Didn't you just tell me you never wanted to see my face again? So I've decided to grant your wish. I'm divorcing Eric, so you won't have to deal with me anymore. I won't be your mom anymore, so we'll be strangers. That means I won't be donating my kidney either.
What?
Nathan's shock was palpable as he raised his voice even louder. Even Eric, who had been passively observing, jumped into our conversation, unable to ignore what I had just said.
That's way too irresponsible. Are you just going to let Nathan die? And what's this about a divorce all of a sudden? What are you talking about?
Yeah, I've got a lot more life ahead of me than you do, old hag, so you better give me that kidney and get the surgery done.
Both of them, now extremely agitated, started hurling insults at me, even at this critical moment. I was utterly fed up with this family who only ever thought about themselves. After everything I'd suffered through, it was only fair they should experience some of that pain. Taking a deep breath, I decided it was time to tell them the truth. Fine, I'll tell you why I'm leaving. Eric, you might have strutted around the house like you were in charge, but I know you're a complete failure at work, constantly causing complaints. Your colleagues are fed up with cleaning up your messes. No one who's doing that poorly in sales is really busy.
How? How do you know that?
And that's not all you've been hiding from me, is it? I've heard you've been bad-mouthing me at work, saying you only married me to get a free maid. You thought my work-from-home jobs made it easy to dump all of Nathan's care and your mom's caregiving on me, didn't you?
That's nonsense. I never said that.
Eric was nervous and in a cold sweat. Actually, the father of one of Nathan's friends, whom I had met earlier, was a colleague of Eric's. It seems that the friend had overheard his father complaining about Eric at home. And there's more, isn't there? You've been having an affair with a girl who just turned 20 for almost 2 years now, haven't you?
How did you find out about that?
Eric clamped his hand over his mouth, realizing too late that he had just confessed. I had long suspected Eric of infidelity. One day, while picking up the suit Eric had carelessly left lying around, I found a receipt for a high-end restaurant in his pocket, showing a bill for a meal for two. While he could have passed it off as a business dinner, I decided to slip a GPS tracker into his bag. Sure enough, the tracker showed him visiting a hotel district and staying there for hours, or spending nights at what I assumed was his mistress's apartment. I hadn't been able to confront him with divorce because I didn't have concrete evidence until now.
You've got to be kidding me. She's only a year older than I am, so you've been chasing after some young woman this whole time?
From what I've seen, Eric was probably texting her just now, ignoring everything else. He was grinning at his phone the whole time.
Shut up. What else could I do? She's just a high school graduate who doesn't know anything about the real world, so I was teaching her the ropes. We're in love, and we can't stop now.
Eric, no longer denying it, started bragging about how his affair began. It was pathetic to see a man pushing 50 so obsessed with a younger woman.
Disgusting. Think about your age. That poor girl is being taken advantage of by a creepy old man like you.
Haha.
Did you just laugh? What's so funny?
Oh, I'm sorry. I couldn't help but be impressed by your acting.
What's that supposed to mean? Speak up.
Well, Nathan, you knew your dad was involved with that girl, didn't you? She's a senior from your high school, isn't she? I've heard that after she graduated and started working, you two met up several times and even had a physical relationship.
What?
I delivered this information with a firm tone, and Nathan, usually so brash, looked utterly shaken. Eric was so shocked he nearly jumped out of his seat. I had learned this from Nathan's friend too. Apparently, Nathan had reconnected with Eric's mistress through social media during high school. They weren't officially dating, but they met up occasionally and engaged in a physical relationship. When she realized who Nathan's father was, the mistress confessed to Nathan that she was seeing Eric. In other words, Nathan had been knowingly sleeping with his dad's mistress. The mistress, who saw Eric as nothing more than a source of money, had been mocking him behind his back with Nathan. Fed up with Nathan's arrogant behavior, his friends had decided to reveal everything to me. They'd only come to visit because Nathan had demanded it, not because they genuinely cared. I was truly grateful to them for telling me everything. The shocking revelation had Eric grabbing Nathan by the collar, in rage.
Nathan, how dare you get involved with someone I care about? You need to apologize and cut off all ties with her immediately.
Care about her? Don't make me laugh. She was just using you for your money. You were never around and didn't care about me, so I did this as revenge. Don't start acting like a father now.
The two of them were locked in a heated argument, likely their first real fight as father and son. The shouting in the hospital room was so loud that a nurse rushed in and desperately tried to break them apart. Neither Eric nor Nathan had any room in their minds for me at that moment. I had been contemplating leaving Eric for years, so I had already prepared a divorce paper and had a lawyer's contact information ready. I quietly placed these documents on the side table and left the hospital room without saying a word. 1 month later, I returned to Eric's house for the first time since I had left, this time to finalize our divorce. I had left quietly, taking only the essentials with me, right after I had walked out of Nathan's hospital room. This time, I brought my lawyer with me, a strong ally in the impending negotiations. When I rang the doorbell, Eric silently came out and led me into the house. He sighed and scratched his head. I entered as if I were a guest in someone else's home, saying, "Excuse me," and then sat down at the dining table with my lawyer. I noticed the scratches on the table that Nathan had made when he was little, and felt a wave of nostalgia. Just then, Susan appeared, supported by him.
You, how dare you betray us like this? We're broke because of you. Give us back the money.
The moment she saw my face, Susan started shouting at me. It seemed like it had been a while since she last raised her voice, as she began coughing and choking. Give it back? I never borrowed or stole any money from you.
Shut up. Ever since you left, our money has been disappearing.
It's because you left. There's no one to take care of Mom anymore, so I have to hire a helper on weekdays. We can't cook meals, so it's all takeout or delivery. We're barely scraping by, and both Nathan and Mom have medical expenses. If you hadn't decided to divorce me, none of this would have happened.
How could you abandon your family like this? The bank account is empty. You need to pay us back for all the money we've had to spend since you left.
I was stunned by the absurdity of their demands. It was their own fault, yet they were trying to pin the blame on me. I was tired of dealing with this nonsense. Susan, Eric works in real estate, doesn't he? Isn't it strange that you're this short on money?
What are you trying to say?
Eric has been spending half of his income on that young woman he's involved with, someone around Nathan's age. Who's really abandoning the family here?
Don't say that.
Is this true, Eric?
Eric paled at my revelation. As I expected, his mom had no idea, and now her anger shifted to Eric. Because he's been wasting money on his affair, I barely received any household support from him. I've been supporting the household entirely with my own income. If anyone should be asking for money back, it's me.
You're lying. There's no way you made enough from that work-from-home jobs to support a whole household. I always thought we were living off Mom's pension and Dad's inheritance.
That money ran out a long time ago.
Eric, do you even know what Helen does for a living?
She works from home, right? Always typing away on her computer?
That's right. Helen is a very successful novelist.
A novelist?
Yes, I had kept it from them all this time, but writing novels is my profession. I've been a bookworm since childhood and eventually discovered a community site where regular people could post their own stories. There, I could read countless works I loved, and I became deeply immersed in that world. Eventually, I wanted to write my own stories, so I started writing novels and posting them on the site. When I decided to keep writing as a hobby into adulthood, one of my stories became popular, and a publisher offered to turn it into a book. Thankfully, the book became a series, which led to anime and film adaptations, bringing in significant income each time. Eric and his mom were both left speechless, their mouths hanging open in shock as they realized I had been the one financially supporting the household all along. As soon as they realized the truth about my income, both Eric and Susan switched their attitudes as quickly as if they were on a roller coaster, suddenly trying to cozy up to me.
I had no idea you had such an impressive job. Eric, you were lucky to have such a wonderful wife.
That's what I thought too. You know, that mistress of mine is just young and nothing more. I'll break it off with her right away. Just don't divorce me, okay? Please forgive me.
Their extreme shift made my skin crawl. It was clear they only cared about their own interests. I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for Eric's ex-wife, who must have felt the same way before she left. After all the horrible things you've put me through, you think I'd forgive you just because you found out I have money? I'm here to finalize the divorce, and I won't leave until we've settled everything.
Come on, please. If you're going to divorce me, at least help with Nathan's kidney transplant first. We can't afford a new donor, and he's your son too. So why not share some of that money?
I refuse, absolutely not. And by the way, Since your infidelity is grounds for divorce, I'll be suing both you and your mistress for damages. Prepare yourselves. I looked at Eric with disdain as I firmly rejected his plea. Realizing no point in arguing, Eric cradled his head in his hands while Susan stared into space, dazed. Thanks to my excellent lawyer, the divorce was finalized swiftly. As the stress that had built up over the years finally started to lift, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. 2 years later, I received the final installment of the damages I had claimed from Eric and his mistress. Although I had wanted them to pay in one lump sum to sever ties more quickly, I had reluctantly agreed to a payment plan since they claimed they couldn't afford it. Now, I could finally cut ties with them completely. I called my lawyer to express my gratitude and share the news. And during our conversation, he gave me an update on their lives since the divorce. Susan's condition had worsened, and she had passed away the previous month. The fiery spirit she had when I lived with her had faded, and she had quietly slipped away like a candle burning out. Nathan was still undergoing treatment in the hospital. He was waiting for a non-family donor, but none had been found yet. In the meantime, he had become the most troublesome patient in the hospital, constantly cursing at the nurses. Unable to pay for his tuition, he had dropped out of college and, abandoned by his friends due to his past behavior, was enduring a lonely battle with his illness. Eric had been dumped by his mistress, who then left her jobs and disappeared without a trace. Having been so infatuated with her, Eric was devastated and unable to focus on work, leading to a salary cut. With the combined burden of paying me damages and covering the medical expenses for both Nathan and his mom, he found himself struggling just to survive. He had borrowed money from everywhere he could, and now he worked his regular jobs during the day and a part-time jobs at night just to get by. It seemed that he had even sold the house to pay off his debts. When I happened to pass by their old home recently, I saw that it was being demolished. Hearing the pillars crash down, I felt as though the painful days I had spent there were crumbling away as well. They say truth is stranger than fiction, but I would have preferred if my experiences remained just a story. As I returned to my parents' home and threw myself back into my work as a novelist, I wish with all my heart that those who live honest lives find true happiness.